Hello. Can you hear me? I'm here. Okay. We got a problem. There's two of me. That doesn't seem good, guys. It seems less than optimal. Let's see. Always something, as you know. Let's see. How do we kill one? Oh, solo layout. Good. Remove. Am I here? Can you see me? There's two with an echo. Is there one? There's one now, but I'm still hearing an echo myself. Are you guys hearing an echo? If you're not hearing, I should have had that second beer. What do you mean? 14th, Lefty Gramps. Okay. So I'm still hearing an echo, and that's a problem for me. Let's go ask a few questions. Let me try to figure out how to get rid of the second me that is backstage right now. And if I can do that, that would be wonderful. Okay. I think I've done it. Although, who cares? Hey, there's Tony. Tony, there's like two of me because I'm stupid. I don't know if I can hear myself. Who the hell cares? Let's do this thing. They can only hear me once, and that's what matters in the end. All right, guys, let's get going. Mitch freaking McConnell. You're familiar with him. Senate Majority Leader, longtime bane of Democrats' existence, has destroyed all comity, ITY, in the Senate. It used to be an institution where people talked to each other, hung out. Even center-right and right-wing Republicans were with Democrats, and they could make legislation and make things work together. Now, Joe Biden brought him over a couple times when it was in his best interest, because all he cares about are winning Senate seats and appointing judges and putting more money in politics. So when the bridges were falling between here and Kentucky, that infrastructure bill looked damn good, and he brought people along. But now Mitch is whining. You see, he's in the Lee Atwater portion of his career. You may remember Lee Atwater, who famously ran the Southern Strategy for Republicans, on his deathbed, apologized for everything he had done. The Willie Horton ad, he apologized to Mike Dukakis. And again, in the spirit of FAFO, what I've been talking about, Mike Dukakis accepted his apology. I would have told him to go to hell as he was dying and said, the quicker you get there, the better for humanity. He was an evil SOB who harmed God knows how many Black Americans with the lies he told and with the racially tinged politics he ran that still controls the Republican Party to this day. Well, Mitch McConnell's the same. He's had a couple things to say since Donald Trump won. First, he was just all broken up that Donald Trump might ignore Senate protocol and end up appointing people during recesses. Well, gee, why would somebody abuse Senate protocol and upset Mitch? Where would Trump have gotten that idea from? Could it be that Mitch McConnell has used the filibuster more than 90% of the times it's been used in history? That it was like a fail-safe backup thing that was used, an accident of history, not even in the Constitution? Mitch McConnell decided to make it that every single person who wanted to pass a bill had to get 60 votes. That's not the way it's supposed to work. In the Constitution, it is a majority chamber. He cheated, he lied, he stole. How did he lie and steal? Well, when it came time, he abused procedure again. What did he do? Made up some fake rule. This is called we need to have a right-wing majority of nutbags on the court rule. And that means that if Antonin Scalia dies in February of the year of the election, when the election really hasn't gotten going, Barack Obama, the Black president, doesn't get to put somebody on the court. That was a Mitch McConnell doing. We should have fought back and ignored the filibuster and, frankly, overrode it by using certain Senate procedures because it's not in the Constitution, but we didn't. We respected it as we too often do, and Mitch McConnell got his way. And then, he forgot about that whole thing about during a Senate election when it came time for him to put another judge on. So when Justice Bader Ginsburg died, we had already voted, a lot of us. We're in the middle of the election ending, but no, that was a good time to add another right-wing lunatic judge who's lacks the qualifications, intelligence, and really personal hygiene to be there. That may have been Brett Kavanaugh I was thinking of. But he couldn't help it because he was working out with Squeak and Nutmeg and Boo Boo and the guys. I don't remember their names. They worked out hard. He had it in his calendar, and that's why he wasn't a blackout drunk who was busy doing terrible things to women. He proved it with all that. In any case, Senate procedure. And then Mitch got really upset. He said, we're not going to become an isolationist party. We're internationalists. We're not going to become America first. That came up in the 1930s, and it was terrible for us. Hey, Mitch, I know you fell over recently. And that some you're there at a you just for about 2 minutes? No, I have these, sorry, FAFO. Uh, maybe you ought to think about the fact this guy ran on America First ever since 2016. That didn't stop you from supporting him. In fact, it didn't even get you to stand up when Barack Obama came to you with the intelligence. And even Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, agreed to get up and make a joint statement to tell Russia to get the hell out of our elections. The only person who wouldn't do it was Mitch. And not only would he not do it, he said that if it were done, if Barack Obama got up and did it, and Paul Ryan wasn't going to do it if Mitch wouldn't, that he would claim it was a partisan maneuver and a lie and attack Democrats. Yeah, treason. He was going to allow Russians to help Trump win because, again, he's owned by corporations and they wanted their judges and they wanted their tax cuts. And Mitch decided that was the most important thing. But you see, Mitch, you know what came along with that? A dude that's been repeating Russian talking points since he visited Russia in the 1980s. So what you got out of that is America first and hating NATO and supporting Putin and supporting Erdogan and supporting Orban and supporting Assad and supporting all these lunatics. And you get Donald Trump now saying that Tulsi Gabbard, who basically is like the trifecta, she's argued in favor of Putin, Xi, and Assad. There should be some kind of like award. Should she get like maybe some steak knives or something for that? Should be the head of our intelligence, so she can just pass it on directly to them. Right. You did that, Mitch, because you may remember there's this thing called January 6th, and you may remember that 57 senators were ready to evict Donald Trump for insurrection. You just needed 10 more Republicans. 7 Republicans were doing it on their own. And considering what you just did for John Thune and every other bill you've ever fought for because you own so many Republicans in the Senate because you're basically a corporate lady of the night and have been willing to do whatever any corporation tells you to raise their dirty money, which you've then used to put judges on courts who then further allowed more money into politics. Gee, you may have helped Donald Trump get to that point where he got reelected this time. First, you didn't disqualify him. And that day, by the way, you fully blamed him. You said he should be held responsible for January 6th. And then you voted to let him off so he could run again. Obviously, there are other forces that could have stopped him too. But you are in the top 3 or 4 of those that have enabled and pushed this man's career forward and destroyed, I don't know, could end up being democracy, but certainly a functioning democracy. So I don't want to hear whine about what happens now. If we leave NATO, it's on you. If Russia gets more belligerent, it's on you. If Iran and China and others, China is running these military exercises right now that are scaring South Korea and Japan. So Japan and South Korea are going to arm, you can bet. Good job there. And parts of NATO, they're scared we're going to ditch them. So if you're in Belgium, let's say, or I don't know, Sweden, and you want to start developing nukes, I understand. You can't trust us anymore. Good job, Mitch. Way to choose America first, but now whine about it. And then the last one, the one I'm going to have to be very comfortable about here, very careful about here on YouTube, because they don't like us talking about this. But let's just say it has something to do with RFK Jr. Mitch McConnell, as a young man, had polio. He still has a limp because of it. So somehow he's personally offended now, after he got the guys that railed against modern medicine reelected. After, again, you know what I'm talking about with modern medicine. It's a YouTube thing here, and I have to be careful what I say. After you have RFK Jr. and others surrounded himself with people attacking modern medicine, attacking the ways we prevent polio, prevent smallpox, and the rest. Well, now suddenly you're offended. You just came out and said, "Oh my God, how can anybody be so irresponsible?" You can be, because you helped get the guy elected who surrounded himself with people who are doing that. And even if RFK Jr. doesn't make it, it doesn't matter. He isn't going to make it in the end, most likely. But you're going to have people making the argument. Whether polio is good or bad is now back in the public arena as an actual argument. Smallpox, the rest, is it worth it to do what it takes, which is nothing, because we know the science, to prevent it or not? We know what your answer is, because apparently it bothers you so much that you helped get Trump elected, because you even endorsed him this time. After he called your wife Coco Chow, and after he attacked you personally. So the reason maybe why Senate procedure is screwed and Trump is going to use that to his advantage, the reason why we're in a America First 1930s support the fascists sort of pose is because of you. And the reason why Americans in vast numbers may become sick again, unhealthy to the point of we will lose, I don't know how many lives, because it's because of you. You've done this all. You built it, to take back an old phrase. So, to take a line from, and again, not get myself in trouble here, take a line from Dirty Rant and Scoundrels, where the evil emperor from Star Wars was actually in that movie. He played the butler. Shut up. That's all I have for you, Mitch. That has been Cliff's note today. Let's put in our friend Tony.
Yo,
so Tony, there's two of me and one of you.
Yeah, so
you can't win.
Yeah, no, what you gotta do is you gotta go exit out of the Chrome tab that the other one's in. You're in two Chrome tabs. That's what it is.
You've said that to me before.
Yeah, we actually did this on a show a couple weeks ago. The audience will remember. So you just go exit out of the Chrome tab, the additional Chrome tab that you have open for StreamYard, and you are in that Chrome tab. Once you exit out of that, there'll be only one of you, not two. You're not twins. And we as a society only need one Cliff Schechter at a time. We only need one Cliff Schechter at a time.
I think one Cliff Schechter is too many. I think there's an argument. So thank you, Tony, for Tony's tech tips. As I hope that
I bring Tony's tech tips here to Cliff Schechter's live stream Cliff's Edge. That's what we do.
Folks were saying they could hear it okay, and it wasn't echoing.
It was it was fine. It was fine. It was only echoing your ear because you had two windows open. That's it.
That's what I figured, and I was able to do that, and that was fine. Only because it was a shame. I did my big rant on public relations and Democrats not engaging in it, understanding it, wanting to control the narrative. And that was that day when, no one could hear me well. So I haven't been able to turn that into a 10-minute sort of rant video because the sound is terrible. So I'm going to have to do that rant again another time and repeat that.
Yeah, sure.
I think, I will. It's it's too important. But how the heck are all of you guys out there doing? Come on, let Tony know so Tony can...
I finally got the raid on Twitch to work for everyone who's over on Twitch. Yeah, it took me a minute to find your channel to do the raid. Sometimes it's a little finicky when you're searching channels that are new, channels that are building. So go over and follow Cliff's Edge 0 on Twitch. That's where this thing is.
Please
streaming to. I finally the raid to work. Mm-hmm.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I got the raid to work. I was telling people in the chat over on Twitch that you have to you have to go directly to his channel, and it finally did it. But
I'm just happy that as I mentioned to people before, I hired an admin, and we've been working on, we've got it in a draft form now, redoing the entire Patreon and YouTube members, where I'm going to be spending my time doing most of my posting, not social media. We've been spending the time on, we haven't gotten there yet, but kind of getting the draft together for TikTok and stuff and for Twitch so that I actually go there, check it out, get people to hopefully join.
I noticed you got a link tree over on Twitch. There's a link tree going.
See, I mean, it just took me finding somebody who's competent and has time to help me. And there's just so many aspects of this. I think that if you don't do it, you don't understand it. Yeah, I mean, you could just do a YouTube and just do live streams to YouTube. But, again, if you want to make this work financially and for the hours you put in, I need to monetize Twitch, even if it's a very little bit. I need to take these videos and put them up on TikTok. I need to grow, and I'm going to put a lot into that. And again, I really feel like I don't want to push it too hard right now. I'm mentioning it. But the proof is in the pudding. And when you've said things in the past, I can understand people not trusting me now. And I think that's fair, that I didn't do what I intended to with the Patreon and the YouTube membership. But again, it's so much easier now that I'm spending so much less time, almost none on Twitter. May close it, may not, but I'm going to keep it, probably keep streaming there, but I'm just not there. And really even Blue Sky, I'm on a half hour or less a day, probably less. I'd say 15 minutes the last 2 days. So
I got pissed off at Blue Sky this morning.
Yeah, that's where I am at this point.
I couldn't, I find it absolutely insane that Blue Sky has a limit of 60-second videos that creators can post. And I don't know if it's like that on the actual website online or not, but
it allows you more online. But you're right.
That's ridiculous. It's an app. It's an app. Why can't you have the same access you have in the app that you have online? It's insanity.
My problem is that a number of voices on there who all join together to pat each other on the back and push each other's channels and whatever have gotten, it's not an ego thing and not whatever. I've got a pretty large account by, I think, normal standards. What I care about is winning, though. Yeah, I need to do more shorts. I see that. I enjoy your shorts. Thank you. Is it Lightfoot SP? I'm going to do that. There is a whole plan, because also with my admin, we sat down and we're planning out a content schedule, because I want all of you who are here, you who are not here and follow and are subscribed, to know we're going to have a pretty, again, it's not going to be 100% foolproof. There are times things won't happen, but a basic time where we're going to get the rant from the beginning of this show as a separate video. A few other rants I record separately. We're going to get them this many times a week at this time. We're going to get this, at least a couple shorts a day. So, well, that's not a nice thing to say. I hope you mean that in a nice way. I mean, those can be fun from what I've heard, obviously. But in any case, my problem at Blue Sky is it became a little bit of that. And I don't care, except for the fact that there are people that claim to be campaign experts and understand PR, who have these huge accounts, who are not campaign experts, have never worked on campaigns before, don't understand PR, and people are listening to them. And there is a point where my frustration level, it makes me angry, because I'm fighting against. It's bad enough to fight Republicans, when I have to fight people saying the wrong things and dumb things on our side. I imagine it's like, I'm sorry, and people can be like, well, anybody can figure it. Now, I did go up to the PhD level in studying things. I did get a graduate degree. Tony didn't get any of that. It doesn't matter. Tony is just naturally brilliant. I'm not saying you have to have done that, but actually, Tony's been a broadcaster for a number of years. You know what happens when you're a broadcaster? Yes, I meant Blue Sky. I was backing up. Thank you, MJ. You're awesome. That is my problem with it. Yes. Is that and some people have put me in some of those packs and whatever, and I don't even think that's fair. Like, everybody should grow, organically, and I don't like it even with me over other people. But like some of the people that have some of the biggest voices, again, you've been a broadcaster, you're good at it, you know how to message.
I'm the best at it. I'm the best at it.
Well, come on, dude.
I'm patting myself
kidding.
On the back here,
Right after Rush Limbaugh, I'm kidding. You're much better than Rush. He was like hooked out of his mind on oxy and death, and you're neither.
Maybe I am too. That's my secret. You just don't know it.
Fair.
You know what I mean?
Fair point. Very fair point. But the bigger issue, I would say, is again, there are people that there are two ways you can learn stuff: by learning it and in studying it from pros, and by doing it. You've learned by doing it, and I think you even studied some of the pros, like Limbaugh and people like that to get
Absolutely.
it. I studied it in school. You studied it outside of school. Doesn't matter. Wherever you take the time to do it. I studied it in school, and then I started doing it myself, and it's worked out, and that's fine. But people there who've never broadcasted, who've never done a single PR campaign, even for like a local bicycle renting company or something, are telling us how world PR should work. And I just, there's a point where I'm like, I could be talking to the people that are kind enough to support me on Patreon and become YouTube members, and sharing all whatever I can share with them, laughing with them, enjoying it, but also sharing wisdom, hopefully, and sharing that on my YouTube wall for everybody who is nice enough to subscribe and who sees it. Or I can be doing it there. And I've just made it, again, like, I'm not going to cast aspersions, but I've decided I'm past that point in my life. All of these apps, I'm done. I'll show up here and
It
there.
is
And
ridiculous. It is hard.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, to be fully transparent, a lot of the social media that I post is not actually posted by me, but it's posted by our little team that we've got going. And they use a software that makes it easy to post on all the platforms all at once, because it is virtually impossible as a content creator to go from one to the other.
God, there's 47 of them now. I mean, it's
so
crazy.
ridiculous. And the fact that you cannot, there's no standard of content, which, and I get that they're competing, right? And we're in this world right now where the competition is pretty stiff when it comes to catching eyeballs and grabbing ears.
Right. And look, you're the pasty fat fascist, at Twitter, or you're the pasty skinny fascist at Meta, and they have to compete with each other. I get it.
Right, exactly. Well, but if we actually give some sort of structure to this industry, because newspapers are gone. They're gone. The organizations that once printed newspapers are still there, but the newspapers themselves are gone.
Did you see that polling, by the way?
Which
because
poll?
It's important.
I'm sure I'll believe everything it says, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean,
I'm pretty skeptical.
I could pull it up right now. I really no, but this was yes, I'm skeptical of polls, but this is
what was the question?
The places without newspapers voted for Trump 2-1 versus places or something like that. I shouldn't say a number because I don't remember. It was a huge disparity between the places with no local newspaper and with a local newspaper. And so people don't get news. They're much more easily fooled by stupid stuff. And the point is that I think you're saying, which is why I was saying before Elon even came along and I knew how bad he was, I was saying this 4, 5, 6 years ago, that Twitter had become so important to the political discourse. It was like if you had a big account there and was giving a campaign contribution, and we weren't treating it that way. And what Elon did, we now know, again, more market research, his posts were being seen 16 times as often as all members of Congress combined. He jacked that thing and used it, besides the $300 million he spent, which Mitch McConnell, I meant to say in my earlier rant, made that possible too, by fighting the Supreme Court for there to be dirty money and overturn campaign finance reform. That is a huge way that people were tricked into doing what they did. Twitter should be a public utility. Nobody private should be able to own it. I'm sorry, it is not. It is too important to the communications infrastructure of our elections. It's too important to our defense. If somebody is believable on there, has some big account, and Elon gives them a blue check, and they say nukes are landing right now, who the hell knows if it starts a riot? Like you can't. You need a responsible entity or human running it. And the only way to do that is for the government to run it. It should be taken over by the government.
I'll push back on you just a little bit, because I believe that it doesn't have to be wholly owned by the government. I believe that we can set certain standards that social media will follow, and these platforms will follow, just like we, electric co-ops. There's electric co-ops and there's corporate co-ops. There's government owned utilities. So there's a different mix in our country of how we do this. And I think we can view social media that way. Back to the newspaper part. I mean, there is a standard that the press kind of held themselves to over the years. They don't kind of have that standard anymore. But the thing is
just by a bit.
Right. But because they had that standard, not just in what they said and what they printed, but also how they handled their business. And a local newspaper would run their local newspaper in a very similar way that maybe another local newspaper would. And that's because it was industry standard. It was market standard. Well, that's all been smashed up with the hammer. And your Facebook feed is literally your local newspaper now.
I mean, it's garbage. They're filling it with whatever get the most engagement.
Again,
and the most sensationalist and whatever.
Again, if there's a standard, though, there was a standard with the local newspaper, and you would get your news delivered to you that way. Now, you weren't getting all the news because of those standards was keeping all the quote-unquote news off the front page of the newspaper. But there's only so much room on the front news of the newspaper, and the reason why is because we can only consume so much information.
Right. Well, look, I agree with you to a certain degree. The only place I will disagree is, remember, We learned from watching Nazi propaganda, Russian Stalinist propaganda. We had all these rules in place. And then enough time went by that Reagan got rid of the fairness doctrine. And yes, as much as I hate to say this, because Bill Clinton played a big role with the Telecommunications Act of 1996, even Democrats forgot. We used to have a rule that you could only own one media entity in any media market because no one person should have too much control. In New York right now alone, Rupert Murdoch has local Fox, Fox News, Fox Business, Wall Street Journal, New York Post. That wouldn't, I mean, before 1996, that you wouldn't even come close to that. And how many other markets that are more swing markets? You know, you want to know why more New Yorkers even end up voting for Trump? Maybe look at all of that put together where they're getting.
Well, but I mean, that's not the government wholly owning entities.
It's the government not. What I guess I was getting at is we can have regulations, but if we're going to do it that way, as opposed to the government just owning the thing, they'd better enforce them, and we better stop the people who try to unenforce them and get rid of them from getting rid of them, because we end up here. This is
the reason why I don't.
Of course, getting rid of the anti-monopoly laws and allowing huge monopolies to grow allowed 6 media companies to take over most of the world when it was already bad enough. But at least it used to be 18 or 25 or whatever it was. You know, I mean,
well, and I think there's a lot of good talk in that that even if someone owns the Washington Post like Jeff Bezos doesn't really have any power as an owner. He has to get on the board and he has to actually participate and engage as one vote on the board. He can stuff the money in his pocket, but he can't make sure that it is operated the way that he wants it because of his own individual interest. But I mean, that goes back to because I'll tell you, I do not want our government owning our media outlets when someone like Trump takes the reins of power in this country. Hails to the no. Like that.
Well, no, but I mean, that's always the tension between, what government runs. I mean, government runs food inspection right now. Well, now we're going to have to rely on Trump for that, and it's going to get a lot worse, and people are going to die of like E. coli. I mean, I guess I'm saying there's always going to be that tension because when bad people take over. But what I'm telling you is, if you want to, then maybe make a rule that about who exactly can take over. Because again, if it's Elon Musk, we've failed. Right. If you need to regulate the hell out of it. And I'm sorry, there have to be ownership rules about who is able to run an entity like that. And it can't be somebody with massive conflicts of interest who've got defense contracts and is buddying up to Putin and all the rest. It can't be somebody like that. And however you put that into law, I can live with that. I understand your point about Donald Trump and Twitter, but it's like the chicken or the egg. I don't think we ever get Donald Trump if Twitter hadn't been owned by Elon Musk. That's the thing. So I get where you're coming from. And I get what I'm saying is more socialist than what you're saying is. But to me, when it comes to the basics, I've always believed, that's why I call myself a social democrat. I'm not a socialist. Obviously I own 2 businesses on my own. I have a third one I co-own, whatever. I believe very much in free enterprise. But I think when it comes to transportation, I think when it comes to medicine, I think when it comes to all sorts of things, I'm not saying the government has to own it. I'm saying the government has to play a major, major role to make sure if it's a basic need of people's, they all get it. And information, truthful information, so you can make the right decisions about what medicine you take and what transportation you choose and where you choose to live and who you choose to vote for and what is safe and what is dangerous and all of that. That information is too important to be left in the hands of private billionaires, like who can say what they want and do what they want at their whims. Last, I'll say, and I'll kick it back to you. And I see that Jessiah is here, so we're going to go to him in a second.
Yeah, sure.
But when you bring up Bezos, my big issue is, sure, he has 1 vote on the board. The problem is that at one point, because he felt like it, he handed Van Jones, maybe the worst possible person, on $100 million. What was it? $100 million to spend on, he gave him to spend on nonprofits as he liked and, pick the good ones and whatever. The people on that board, maybe they're all so rich themselves that it doesn't matter, but they know what kind of money Bezos has. And that has influence. And if you think that doesn't influence their votes, in any case.
Well, I mean, we could talk about monopolies all day long, and that's really the issue that we have, and it's the reason why we should not get distracted in this country from these shiny objects. This left versus right arguments where we should be arguing up versus down. I think that's the key to getting back to a place in this country where the great American working class, as I referred to it, actually puts us in a position where liberals in this country are the tent in which the great American working class reside, not under the MAGA tent, because it is clear in this election what happened is Donald Trump used populism, even though it's kind of BS populism.
It's fake.
Meaning,
it's the faux populism of all
absolutely.
Yeah.
But populism absolutely is appealing to the working class and to working people, not just in our country, but countries around the world. And until we get back to that messaging and we stop arguing over bathrooms and drag queens and this sort of stuff, who's woker than who, if we can get away from the left versus right argument, that's the argument that the rich billionaires who own the Washington Post, who own all the media outlets, who own the YouTube, who own X, that is the conversations they want us in, because when we're doing that, they're robbing us blind. They're cutting Social Security. They're gonna run roughshod over Medicare and Medicaid. That's what they're going to do. And they're going to steal our national defense budgets. That's what the yes man Pete Hegseth's about. And that's why they have him.
They're going to pocket it. Well, all the, the Eric Princes.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody say hi to Josiah.
Hey, Josiah, how are you?
Hey, doing well. How are you?
Tony
guys?
Michael's here. I don't know, fellow YouTuber, you guys may know each other, know of each other. Josiah,
I'm not familiar, but I'm happy to always meet somebody who's not only like appear in the space, but somebody's pretty outspoken on politics. How are you guys doing?
I'm not outspoken at all.
You're not a wallflower.
Yeah. I'm just an observer. Is all.
You guys should talk to each other. He's another guy who. He's got a large platform. What do you have? 150,000 subscribers at this point, Tony? So Tony's got a great pod. I think you call it. Do you call it a podcast? Live stream. I call mine a live stream because it sounds more.
There. He's got it on the branding.
Yeah, see that? Look at that.
Look at that branding right there.
Yeah, I can't read
behind me.
I thought I told you that
every single time. I got it on the TV every day.
That's smart. I'm doing like the home goods, live, laugh, love setup here.
Dude, I like yours.
Of course, Cliff would like your background more than he likes mine. I'm a hillbilly from Missouri. I'm a
hillbilly from Kentucky, baby.
Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah, there you go.
No, it's not.
I see how you're selling it, Josiah. I see how you're selling it.
Tony,
you're like,
Tony,
I'm from Kentucky.
Tony, I've wanted to have that. Like, I wanted to get like the cool lights in the background forever. That's what I like.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get anything like here. It took me enough effort just to get like a picture of Mickey Mantle and a book by Bruce Springsteen and my own book up behind me. So I have work to do. That's what I like about his. I like the vibe. That's all I'm saying.
I appreciate it. Listen, it's like you're going to. Oh shit, man! I'm blank. I said Home Goods, but what is the name?
Bed Bath and Beyond.
Bed Bath and Beyond. Hobby Lobby.
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah.
Minus the Christian fundamentalism.
I was going to say, and you can while you're there, you can pray. And you can also
be bigoted,
theocratic.
Right. Well, hey, you may want to put a cross back there soon.
That's true.
January 20th, you might want to put like a crucifix or something back there.
Tony, that's not a bad idea. The problem is, as a godless liberal heathen, crosses will burst into flame as soon as they get within like certain proximity of me. You ever see Dracula? You know how like they'll hold a cross up to a vampire and just burst into flame? It's me, Yeah,
a
little
bit. So it's not the wooden stake. It's not the wooden stake. It's the crucifix that does you in.
So it's the crucifix. It's religious iconography. It's sunlight.
Right. And some of them
Trump
are for
winning elections.
Too.
I'll spider crawl up the wall.
All right.
Oh yeah, like if you lose the election and then you get to wipe feces in the wall of the Capitol, and then it's all okay.
No, that's Cliff. Respectfully, remember we're dealing with an asymmetry here. They get certain permissions to do things. It's okay for the right to stage insurrections, right? We on the left, those of us in the Democratic Party, what we do is, concede elections and commit to peaceful transfers of power, and that's
we're crazy that way.
Yeah.
Well, earlier today, I do this regularly I go on and co-host Bob Seska's podcast on Tuesdays as a thing he invited me to do with him regularly now. And when I was talking about one of those, you have to bring up every once in a while. What if we did this? Because you just have to, right? And of course, there's plenty of examples. But I was like, with Yakov Smirnov, whatever his name is today, in court getting, what did he get? Is he going to get 4 years, 5 years? But the Russian spy, who was one of James Comer's main main witnesses against Hunter Biden. And in the end, Jamie Raskin gave this impassioned speech at one point, which I put up on here and did some commentary on, where he was like, he was laughing too at Comer. He's like, so your three witnesses are, he's like, he's a Russian spy, a Chinese spy. I was like, the second one was proven a Chinese spy. And the third one, he's like, and I still can't believe this. You had to zoom in from prison. And those were their three. Now imagine it's us and we're looking into Don Jr., Mr. 8-Ball McGee there, or Eric with the gums, or Ivanka, the apple of Donald's eye. And imagine if we're looking, exactly. Imagine if we're looking.
Wasn't Kimberly Guilfoyle grabbing her crotch at the CPAC? Wasn't she like?
Yeah, she was.
I know. I think she was. I think she. You know, hey, what am I? I'm just trying to get with the facts here.
Well, no. Well, so let me just say it. So we finish that little point, which is, what if Democrats were investigating a Republican son or daughter of a president, and our three witnesses were, hi, this is a Russian spy, this is a Chinese spy, and this is somebody zooming in from prison? Do you think the media would ever let us live that down? Do you think the media would allow Democrats to remain?
I don't want to take a dump in your Cheerios, but maybe, just maybe, we should get our own Russian spies. We should get our own Chinese spies. It seems to be working. It seems to be working for the other side. Maybe we should just invest. We should invest in our own Russian spies and our own Chinese.
I mean,
spies.
I will say, I'll meet him halfway, and I'll say that I do think Democrats. I think that, listen. First things first, I know there's a lot of doomerism right now. I'm experiencing it myself. But one thing I want to remind people who are shitting on Democrats shitting on Democrats, Republican centrists, people who are out like so far left that they don't consider themselves Democrats. I just want to be clear. Democrats can and do win elections. We beat Trump in 2018. We beat Trump in 2020. We beat Trump in 2021 by flipping the two Republican Georgia seats to the Democrats. We beat him in the 2022 midterms despite enormous headwinds, and we kicked their ass in 2023 off-year elections. So I just want to be very clear. The Democratic Party needs to be introspective. We need to criticize the Democratic Party from a position of good faith. But people who want to write the Democratic Party's obituary and say, you guys don't know how to win elections, like this bullshit.
Well, that's just stupid.
It's not true.
Dumb.
It's not true. So having said that, though, one thing that I think that we do need to learn from Republicans is how to play a certain type of politics, because Republicans suck at governing.
A lot on here, Jessiah, just so you know, because I'm a big believer in you need to play the kind of alpha Democratic politics where we kick them in the shins early and often.
100%. So, like, for example, yeah, I know Tony was like half, his tongue in cheek there when he was talking about, get our own Russian spies, but I think he's onto something in the sense we should have investigated Jared Kushner. Why Jared Kushner got a 100%. $2 billion deal from the Saudis after leaving the Trump White House as being the de facto Secretary of State. Not only should that have been investigated, and it actually was to some extent, there's a preliminary investigation going behind the scenes. But if I ever have the privilege of ever speaking to Congressman Raskin, one of the armchair quarterback opinions I'll offer is, Congressman, you should have put that on prime time. There's a media savvy there that the Republicans have that even Raskin, as brilliant as he is, just simply doesn't get.
Well, can I say something though about
please.
that though? Because you do have to remember we were in the minority. My big problem is
no.
We had the majority in the Senate, and Dick Durbin, who ran Judiciary, basically sat there as Clarence Thomas. It came out that dude basically took trips around Jupiter, at Harlan Crow's expense, and had, was like walking around with 14 watches on, and had 27 Armani suits, and nothing, no hearings. No, I mean, we could have been running those same kinds of hearings.
Well, Cliff, I got to do a fact check here. We weren't in the minority until January 2023. We had 2 years under President Biden.
Say in there, I meant more recent.
And I'm sorry, it should have been day one. We should have been like, listen, Trump has forever changed the game of politics. He has investigated his political opponents, both in the Department of Justice. Republicans investigated Hunter Biden in 2019 and 2020 when they had the majority. So you know what? Turnabout's fair play. We actually have a pretty good predicate to investigate Jared Kushner, who inked a $2 billion deal, something infinitely, just on the merits, infinitely more corrupt than anything we know about Hunter Biden. And we're going to put it in prime time. And if you don't fucking like it, don't ever do it to us again. Tit for tat is an evolutionary paradigm.
Dude, I literally. I mean, just so you know, I this is a lot of what I talk about.
I know we're on the same page. Yeah.
Like the response to them when people are like, it should be commensurate. I'm like, commensurate. You should destroy them so badly with your response that they will never come back again. Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, working in the White House should have been investigated immediately. Donald Trump Jr., which he did originally, being in the White House should have been investigated, immediately. And 55 other things that we're talking about, that were their connections to this. We should have had those investigations constantly, but we should have focused in on 2 or 3, the way they focused in on Hunter Biden. It was all about dirtying up Joe Biden. So you dirty up Donald Trump. And I wouldn't want to ever become like them in that we are evil. So if I thought any one of those kids were innocent, I would say no. But Don Jr., no, I'm just saying, I don't want to.
Yeah, he's not saying investigate Barron. You don't think Barron should be investigated.
I don't want to hurt innocent people the way they want to. But Don Jr. certainly ain't innocent, and Eric ain't innocent, and Ivanka, they were enablers, and 2 of the 3 of them, Eric and Don Jr., spend half their time insulting Democrats and not shutting up ever. And so, yeah. We should have gone after all of them. And again, but we also should have been going after the Supreme Court constantly. The failure, I feel like, at least on the Democratic side with Hakeem Jeffries taking over in the House and some of that stuff, we've gotten some tougher, younger messengers taking over. But on the Senate side, man, we are still run by basically people the age of Chuck Grassley. Like, they're around in the Pleistocene era. We honestly need to have some, like Brian Schatz. How about Brian Schatz? Let him run things. We need people who are aggressive, funny, will do it. Won't just say, oh, well, it's not worth it because we'll never get Clarence Thomas. That's not what it's about. It's about the PR battle. It's about the campaign.
He just introduced a bill, I think, today or yesterday to abolish the Electoral College, which obviously isn't going to go anywhere, but it's important to regularly bring that up. Believe it or not, folks, for those of you watching, during the Nixon administration, we came this close to getting rid of the Electoral College.
I know, because Republicans agreed back then. They were
right.
Yeah. Well, because they had the same problem we have. And I want to say this before I go, because I do have to jump here. Democrats can win elections. I'll agree with you, Jessiah, but they do not know how to win the ones that matter. They do not know how to win when they got to pick Supreme Court justices. They do not know how to win when we get women's rights stripped away from them by turning down Roe v. Wade. They do not know how to win when our democracy is at stake in 2024. And the reason why Democrats do not know how to win the actual races that they need to win when they need to win them is because they are no longer the party of the working class. And I know that sounds weird because we as liberals view ourselves as that, but we suck as a brand. Our brand sucks. And people in this country don't want to be liberals. They don't want to be lefties. They don't want to be Marxists. They don't want to be socialists. And they sure as hell don't want to be Democrats. And until we change our brand, until we start changing the stuff we talk about and we focus on as commentators and as pundits and force the politicians to have those conversations. And what I'm talking about is less of this left versus right stuff and more of this up versus down. Because let me tell you, Luigi isn't a hero. But let me tell you who the villain really was in that story, and it was Brian Thompson. That was the villain in that story. So, and that's what the country knows, and that's what the country wants to hear from the Democratic Party, not this pearl clutching stuff, not this stuff about.
I agree with you, especially when they're not sitting there and saying, okay, this guy committed murder, yes, but they're not sitting there saying, look at the rejection rate by United Healthcare. Look at all the people who lost a father just the way Brian Thompson was killed, who lost a mother, who lost somebody because these healthcare companies just said, nope, we're taking I put a short up you saw on the channel about a guy who was talking about how his mom was having a lung transplant, and during it, the healthcare company pulled the health insurance. Look at how Anthem was going to set a limit on anesthesia.
Well, let me tell you something.
No more anesthesia at this point. If they wake up during the operation, that's just what happens. I get what you're saying. I do want to put an amendment to what you're saying, though, Tony, is, look, in 1992, very much, I know I'm going back, but it very much abortion rights was being argued, and these things are on the ballot, and we won. It's not that we're not good at winning the big elections. It's that they always have a head start. It's that every election, we have one arm and one leg at least tied behind our backs because they're suppressing votes, because they've got a huge media disinformation ecosystem that we can't come close to matching. Because as you just pointed out, we're talking about the wrong things. So we go into every election with, there's a massive advantage. And I had John Fugel saying on 2 weeks ago, and as he brought up, he said, never during my lifetime has a Democrat been elected president when a Republican didn't screw things up first so that they ended up winning. It's that they need to screw everything up. And then we also need to have like the most charismatic speaker ever, right? Bill Clinton wins, right? Barack Obama, because you've got two of the best orators of the last 50 years. We shouldn't need to have a straight flush to win elections. And that, I don't care what election that is and how important it is. To me, it's just about the fact that they always have a massive advantage because of those factors.
Well, and I'll go back to the story of Luigi Mangione and Brian Thompson. Luigi Mangione may have assassinated Brian Thompson on the sidewalk of Midtown Manhattan, but the real story is there that Brian Thompson and United Healthcare, as the CEO of that company, assassinated people with a contract every single day in this country, with a contract, not with a gun, with a contract. So remember that when they're stealing our federal budget, when they're fleecing our money, and they're keeping us distracted with these conversations about bathrooms, drag shows, and drones while they're robbing us blind, that's the intention, and that's what they're going to do. That's all I'm going to say.
I'm hoping the drones is the Mars attacks. I think we've proven that
drones. Let's get more drones.
Look, the Mars attacks little guys have looked at us and said they can't cover themselves, so they're coming. They're coming. Okay.
What's more American than drones looking for nuclear weapons and delivering you food? That's American, baby. That's American. Drones.
Tony,
don't be scared of them.
I need to let Jessiah talk more. So
I'm gonna get out of here.
You need to be quiet, and I need to be quiet because
we'll see you guys soon. See you guys.
It's nice to meet you, Tony.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon, Cliff.
Yeah, have a good one, man.
Take care, buddy. All right, my man. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the invitation.
Of course, I should have asked for more than just Jessiah is a guy who's from Kentucky, lives in North Carolina, has beautiful lights up behind him, and has lots of followers or lots of subscribers on YouTube. I'd like to give you a more a larger bio, but I don't even think I know your last name. It's always Jessiah from Pondering Politics. You're like Madonna or Cher. You have no last name.
Really my inspiration. One of my favorite songs is If I Could Turn Back Time by Cher, 1989. Incredible music video.
On the boat, on the ship.
Exactly.
That was excellent.
100%. Yeah. So yeah, I'm depending on where your political position is, I'm either a liberal or progressive YouTube content creator. Got into it really full time about this time last year. I would say theses of my channel. Number one, I am an unapologetically partisan progressive Democrat, in that, not that the Democratic Party is perfect, but I refuse to indulge in false equivalence. They have better policies, better virtues, better values. They're a better way forward. They're a better political proxy. Number two, the Republican Party has become an authoritarian cult of personality with no limiting principle. And number three, I despise enlightened centrism. Life is about choices and recognizing meaningful differences between two things. If you can recognize that there's a difference between a shoplifter and a mass murderer, between stage 4 cancer and the common cold, you can recognize meaningful differences between the two political parties, which make the Democratic Party the better option.
Of course.
And
can I ask you something about that, though?
Yeah, please.
So when you're saying, I mean, just when you're referring to enlightened centrists, of course, there's some of the usual Chris Cillizza types out there that are pathetic and we've all hated for years, and I don't even know who reads them. But are you talking about in general mainstream media? Because I've spent a lot of time ranting about the both sides. I mean, here's the simplest analogy I can come up with. You a baseball fan?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Basketball. I like basketball.
Fine. Let's do basketball then. So if you're the New York Times, the way you write a story, the Phoenix Suns beat the New York Knicks, let's just say 113 to 101. What they would say is, well, we spoke to the Phoenix Suns coach, who argued that the Phoenix Suns won the game by 113 to 101, having scored more points. However, when speaking to the coach of the New York Knicks, he made it clear to us that they had been more successful in passing the ball. They had blocked more balls, and they had higher possession. So perhaps they also can make the argument for having won this fight. And that is how, if they were to apply what they do in politics to anything else, it would be so ridiculous.
What's funny is I categorically disagree. I almost wish that were the case, Cliff. I wish I had your optimistic view of the mainstream media, because quite frankly, the straw man that you created is more nuanced and more reasonable than the case that the mainstream media makes to defend Republicans. Because to your point, yes, obviously at the end of the day, victory in a game is determined by the final number of points, but you can also point to other metrics in which the losing team did a better job. But the mainstream media doesn't even do that. Instead, what it is, team A says, well, we won at the end of the day because we accumulated more points. Team B says, actually, no, the whole thing was rigged. They were setting up the scoreboard. They were setting up the scoreboard falsely in the Suns' favor, and victory was stolen from us. And then the mainstream media is like, well, we just have two competing claims here.
I think my version was pre-Trump Republicans versus Democrats.
Right.
And I think yours is post, because the version I gave very much, everybody got very upset because Trump obviously is so outside the pale. But even, in the years before, when Mitt Romney was the nominee in 2012, people forget because, he did the right thing against impeachment, and here and there would have proposed something decent like a child tax credit or whatever. How much of a right-wing nut he ran in 2012.
For the time,
and
Romney was very
they were both
right,
siding then, and they were both siding with the Tea Party when they won in 2010. And then they weren't saying it was rigged, but they were making the case to make them less crazy. That their argument may have some merit too, even if science and fact and math and history only have one actual answer.
Right.
There is one side.
I remember when in the pre-Trump era, the Tea Party would rail against climate change during the Obama administration by literally bringing handfuls of snow into Congress. Global warming can't be real, Clef.
Right. The moron from Oklahoma. What was his name? The moronic senator from Oklahoma.
I'm blanking on it. But yeah, he went viral for that shit.
Yeah, well, we were blanking on it because he should have, honestly, that's his legacy for history, is holding a snowball. I don't think he did another damn thing.
Wait a minute, you say snowball too many times, Don Jr. is going to show up somewhere to just like say
snowball. I know.
Yeah.
It's going to basically. I'm trying to repeat the scene from Scarface. If I just dump a big pile on the desk here, Don Jr. just runs in and just throws his face in there,
hoovering it up, man. He's like, it's a fucking swimming pool for him. Yeah.
All right, man. I'm enjoying Jim Inhofe, Brad Polly with the win.
There we go.
Thank you. That's who it was, that moron. That guy. And again, he's smarter than at least 2/3 of the Republican caucus today. And back then, he easily was one of the top 3 or 4 biggest idiots.
He was the Lauren Boebert of the pre-Trump. Yeah.
Next to Ted Cruz, next to you. I mean, you put him next to Mike Lee. I mean, we don't need to go through it.
Based Mike Lee, Cliff.
I mean, well, that's the other thing that bothers me about them is they're so not cool, and they think they're cool. Like, they were the people who were the weird incel losers like Elon Musk, who didn't know how to talk to other human beings, or JD Vance, who can't order a bunch of freaking donuts, or, like Tom Cotton, who for some reason goes on TV every week just to sit there and stare angrily at the host. Like, they literally are a charisma event horizon. They're the most unpopular people. They're a black hole that sucks charisma out of a room. But they found one guy who, while I find him absolutely repulsive in Donald Trump, has this animal-like ability to walk in a room and know what every single person in there wants, and the kind of lack of empathy and lack of any care in the world that he will promise them he'll get it for them and make an obnoxious joke at somebody's expense because he knows that'll make them laugh. Like, he has right-wing charisma, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting to contemplate charisma in the age of Trump, because I suppose by definition we have to concede that Trump has it. I personally have never been a big fan of Donald Trump, even long before he entered politics. I don't watch reality TV, so The Apprentice didn't appeal to me. He didn't make Home Alone 2 with a sequel.
Dude, I grew up in New York, and this dude was on the back of the paper, and it turned out, he was calling in as John Miller or John Barron. Gee, I wonder where the kid's name came from. And he had a couple different names. He would call and pretend to be one of his own aides and say, oh, well, what's her name? The second wife says she had the best sex with Donald Trump ever. And then that would be on the back page. And that sort of told you everything you needed to know, which was this guy wants the fact that he's being he's committing open infidelity to be splashed across the back page, because he's so gauche, he's so disgusting that he thinks that's something to be proud of. And so I grew up with that Donald Trump, the buffoon that we all laughed at, that went bankrupt, that no New Yorker, just had a call with some of the kids I went to school with up to the 8th grade. They're not kids anymore. They're old like me, but we were all friends, and about 6 or 7 of us just did a call. And we were talking about, like, how did that guy, the one that we all thought was the biggest joke, I want to let you talk, but you should know the only reason he was even in Home Alone 2 is his rule was, Matt Damon told this story. His rule was that if anybody filmed on his property, any of his properties, he had to get a cameo in the movie. So what most of the filmmakers would do is they'd be like, fine, they give him a cameo and then they would cut it during editing. And that's what Matt Damon did. There was some movie Matt Damon was talking about where they did that. And he's like, I don't know what happened to Home Alone 2. Somebody must have just forgotten, basically, is what he said. So
yeah, well, I mean, to your point, so this guy's a malignant narcissist and a buffoon, and he's about to once again become the most powerful man on earth, and arguably the most powerful man on earth, given, you know, recent Supreme Court decisions about immunity, the institutional advantages. Like, you know, Tony, before he left, was and you guys were having a conversation about the advantages that Republicans have. And one of the things I feel is so instructive, we have to really break this down. So Trump will have the presidency. He'll have the Senate. He'll have the House. He has a 6-3 conservative supermajority on the Supreme Court. 30 out of 50 state legislatures are Republican. Sinclair is a right-wing media group which controls most local media.
They paid me in 2004 to be the liberal analyst during that election to argue with pretty much their host. And
you were Jesse Tatarlov.
Yes. And yeah. I like that comparison because I wasn't a patsy. Like, I was there and I fought and I argued, and I often viewed it as
Cliff. You argued? You, Cliff?
I know it's
Cliff.
shocking, isn't it?
What? No,
I know, but I'd like people to think at least I was at least effective at it and went in and won those because I wasn't sitting there. You know, there used to be the Fox News Democrat, as we would call it, which Jessica Tarloff isn't. She's awesome.
No,
but there used to be like a Fox News Democrat who they'd invite some wimp on who'd sit there and just get beaten up. And you were right. Go back
to Harold Ford Jr.
Yes, that.
Yeah.
Go back to what you were saying, by the way, about I cut you off. Sinclair,
no,
you were right.
Yeah,
so they're probably in your market. They are here in Cincinnati.
Yes.
They own local stations. You know, they're honestly like locusts. They go throughout the country. They really
are. And they're sinister in the lack of attention they get. They're constantly flying under the radar, even though in their own way they have as much pervasive influence as Fox News. They just don't have the name
because people trust their local news. And then they
And also, it's worth noting that the incoming, FCC chairman, Brandon Carr, wants to make it easier for interests like Sinclair to monopolize local media. He wants to reduce federal regulations and federal restrictions so as to allow these right-wing media conglomerates to buy up local media. You have Fox. You know, people talk about mainstream media and Fox. That's one of the many things that we should work aggressively to correct this next election cycle. Fox is not the antithesis to mainstream media. Fox is by definition mainstream media. They are by far the biggest and most successful legacy news network. CNN and MSNBC combined can't match.
Well, these
Fox
days they
News.
don't even have a pulse at both of those places.
Jesus, yeah, and I know you've been. I think I've seen you rail rightly on Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, and we'll get into that because I totally agree. But my point is that Fox, is the titan in legacy media, so that's another advantage the right has. You look at alternate media. You look at in this space, Tim Pool, the Daily Wire. The Daily Wire's constituent creators, because Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro are all heavyweights in their own.
It helps in Tim Pool's case when Russia is paying you, though. You have to admit. But go ahead. Same with Benny Johnson.
Joe Rogan, all these other things. So my point is,
and one more, I just have to add it because it's so essential. Is their control. A lot of it is Salem Christian radio, but even iHeartMedia now, their control of local radio is much like Sinclair, is that you have all these local right-wing shows. I go on one regularly in Minneapolis, not right-wing, Matt McNeil, who's fabulous, and you should have him on sometime. He holds the fort for us. It's one of the, I don't know how many, half dozen. I mean, it's some small number of independently owned progressive terrestrial radio stations in the country based in Minneapolis. And Matt's show goes out to Seattle, Chicago, other places. But the fact that is an exception, right? That we own that state, and it's actually in a swing state. Oh my God. That we have that station there where they've got them. I mean, here, there is no liberal voice on radio here. There is morning zoo and right-wing, and sports and whatever, and right-wing radio. And that is it.
Yeah, and even the exceptions, unfortunately, are just insufficient. I mean, you've got, you've just now reached 100,000 subscribers, and congratulations, by the way.
Thanks,
I have about 430. Luke Beasley just cracked 1 million. Adam Mockler is pushing He's 750,000. So we have people in the space, Brian Tyler Cohen, David Pakman. But if you add us all together in aggregate and hold us up to the right wing in this space, there's a huge delta. And so my point is, one of the things that I always try to be mindful of, and I encourage others to be mindful of as well, which I know you get this, but your viewers as well, we are at so many institutional advantages. One of the biggest things, the most important paradigm you can have, in my opinion, as a responsible person engaged in politics, is not to make an already challenging job that much harder. That's the thought process I have. What takes this, this incredible hike? What can I do to prevent it from becoming a sheer climb? And it's important to remember all of the forces arrayed against us. And then when you see things like recent developments, Trump suing Ann Selzer,
ABC, I mean, that's the worst of all of them, which is, I feel like the ABC and Trump just invented a new money laundering scheme. Like from now on, anybody that wants to bribe him, the easiest way to do it is he just sues them. Any corporation that wants to bribe him, he just sues them. They settle and just say, okay, 20 million, where should we give it to you? And he's like, here, put it over here in some opaque, kind of like foundation or something where you can just steal all of it. I mean, that's what we're looking at.
Yeah. And again, he hasn't even been inaugurated yet. So my point to finish it up is Trump is inheriting all these institutions, all these advantages, and he's going to go into office as the most powerful person ever. And we are truly in a position where so much of the next 4 years will be dependent on Trump's largesse, his sense of mercy, his ability to be distracted by other things.
Luckily that we have the sense of mercy, there's none. But luckily what we do have is a serious love, it seems, for the crispy wings from KFC and Fox and Friends. So if we can find a way to just put that on a loop on his TV, and just keep giving him more crispy wings. I mean, hey, who am I to? I'm not going to say anything bad here. I'm just going to say the man's cholesterol rate is high. That's all I'm going to say.
But he comes from a very long-lived lineage. Apparently, his father was ancient by the time he passed away.
They were.
Yeah,
but I don't think any of them challenged it in the manner. I mean, he gets winded walking up 2 steps. He's enraged all the time. He doesn't sleep, apparently, from what people say, like a couple hours here and there. He eats terribly. He doesn't work out. These are all things one would call high risk factors. So I don't know. Maybe
and we've also seen a decline in Trump as well, cognitively. Not that he was ever a beacon of cognitive health as well, but this was one of the things, going back to the double standard I railed against on my channel all the time, which is, listen, I think it's perfectly fair to ask questions about the mental fitness of a commander-in-chief, Democrat or Republican. And so I didn't begrudge anybody if they had questions about President Biden's mental health or his
especially at that age. I'll say you have to ask those questions. That's fair. Yes.
But you also have to apply the standard evenly. And that's the thing that really pissed me off, which is, okay, I would understand the asymmetry if it were Joe Biden versus Ron DeSantis, right? Ron DeSantis, who's in his late 40s, I believe, somebody who is not prone to gas, somebody who is a clear communicator, not a persuasive one, but a clear one.
No, those white booties got to go too, but I got you.
Right. It's exactly his heels. But the problem is you have 2 comparably old men who are both gaffe machines. And if you look at the polls showed that actually a majority of Americans also had doubts about Trump's mental fitness for office. And this was more pronounced when Vice President Harris became the nominee, but it never got a fraction of the coverage. And that's the thing that pissed me off, the double standard. If you hold them to the same standard and Trump comes out ahead, that's fine. At least it's fair. But they didn't do it. They felt the need. We talk about how Trump is a criminal. We have to find something to artificially balance the scales. Okay, Biden is old. Well, Trump is old and a criminal, right? So
I was just saying, old and a criminal and rapist, and
careful, Cliff, careful. My God,
allegedly, yeah. You know what? The difference is that I may not be a lawyer, but I get it somewhat pretty well how the law works. He's a very famous figure. I know what New York law is, and I know what the national definition of rape is. It includes fingers. Sorry, dude.
You're just quoting the presiding judge, Cliff. That's the other thing. I mean,
I hate to do that. Thank you, by the way, Sheldon. And I should have said thank you earlier. I apologize. I don't mean the conversation. Grateful Dad for the gifted 5 memberships. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. You go again, Jessiah. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, it was the presiding judge, Judge Kaplan, was the one who clarified in a post court motion, because Trump's attorneys tried to respond with their own counter motion against E. Jean Carroll, and the judge said, listen, did E. Jean Carroll prove to the satisfaction of New York criminal statute that Trump raped her? No, but what she did prove, and what the jury did find, that qualifies as rape in the common parlance.
Because New York statute, just so people know, I think it may have been earlier. I don't want to get into things that don't make people uncomfortable, but it has to do with sexual organs versus fingers. And in New York, they've got a very specific standard, but that is not the common parlance and the common understanding of it. And the judge, as Jessiah has pointed out, said that very clearly. And that is that. ABC would have won that thing. And then you throw on top of that we make it very difficult for you ever to lose when you're saying something about a public figure in this country, which I think actually is wrong and is a big problem with our political system, is anybody can make up any lie and just be like, well, they're a public figure, so I can say that they like to have post-birth abortions or whatever, and they can get away with it. But that's for a different time. Point being, yes. What I said before was exactly accurate. And I want to get back to your earlier point, which is, again, the thing about the Biden thing is it reminded me too much of the Hillary's emails. It was the media grabbing one thing because they couldn't find anything else about whoever's running against Trump, who has 800,000 things wrong with him. You can go back to Trump University and the $25 million settlement he had to pay there for ripping people off. You can go back to, the Taj Mahal and all of the workers he refused to pay, all of the contractors who lost their businesses because he gave them 40 cents on the dollar for, there's these stories are all out there, right? So, but what we're going to do is not talk about that. We're talking about Biden's age. And so to me, it's about fairness in covering both of their ages, but it's also about proportionality versus an overall campaign. It was like the pack, the hyena pack. It was like, enough. Having a couple stories questioning Biden's age, fair. He was the oldest person ever to be running for president. But when he got to a point where we stared at 3 straight weeks of just nonstop stories, they refused to admit, mainstream media, about the proportion aspect of it. They act like, well, we cover Trump, we say the stuff. And I'm like, you do not do it in proportion to his awful.
And the proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the pudding to exactly what you're talking about. So let's grant the ridiculous premise that for some reason Biden's age and mental fitness were just objectively more of an issue than Trump's.
Right.
Let's just grant the premise. Well, what happened when Biden dropped out and Vice President Harris became the nominee? Well, there you have a near 30-year age delta again, right? So then if the logic follows, if the standard really is what the media says it was, then the scrutiny would have been on Trump's age and mental fitness, but it wasn't.
Not nearly like the Biden, same.
Exactly. And so that's how you know they're full of shit. It's like, okay, it's not about a standard that you think Biden just demonstrably violates much more and therefore deserves more scrutiny. It's that bad faith quest for some sort of artificial balance. And by the way, fair and balance are actually not necessarily the same thing. Again, I use my example of a shoplifter and a murderer. If you have a conversation about these two things and the analysis is simply, well, they're both criminals, period, and you don't identify meaningful distinctions between a shoplifter and a murderer, your legal analysis sucks.
Yes.
And same thing with your medical analysis. If someone says, well, doctor, you've got 2 patients, I don't know which one you should focus on. One has stage 4 cancer, the other one has a cold. And the doctor says, well, I don't know either. They're both
injured. They're both not feeling well.
Yeah. Right. You would say you should lose your medical license, you piece of shit. You clearly have to have judgment here. And so I just, and
they never show it. And I don't, again, I'd like to ask you, toss it to you, but I've given up. We hit them so hard to shame them during this past election. And yes, there are times we change a headline that was so ridiculous. They're being mocked everywhere. And I'm friends with Doug Balloon, New York Times pitch bot. He definitely helped along some of those narratives about how ridiculous they are. But in the end, proof is in the pudding, so to speak. Bezos pulled back the endorsement. I can't remember the name of the LA Times owner, but he pulled back the endorsement. He's now got some fake AI thing that has to tell him that it's balanced stories from both sides. I mean,
he also hired Scott Jennings to be.
He also hired Scott Jennings, who, again, is somebody, who I met my wife. Embarrassing. You'll certainly. I think you may know this. I may have told you. I met my wife working against Mitch McConnell in 2002. That's how, she was from Cincinnati, and that's how I left the East Coast. But Scott Jennings was on those campaigns, an awful, dishonest, horrible person, and just keeps getting cool at CNN and now at the LA Times too. I don't think we can change. I think honestly, I've pushed people to just unsubscribe, stop watching them. We need to create our own infrastructure. We need to support creators on YouTube, certainly. But, I went on with Bob Sesko, who's got a popular, and I co-host on Tuesdays, his podcast, support that. I go on with Stephanie Miller. Everybody should be watching and listening to her. She's great. We need to get, and we need, I was talking before you came on about the figure, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but this huge difference between areas that had local newspapers and didn't, the ones that didn't, voting for Trump in much larger numbers. Even just having somebody willing to put the funding in to fill in local newspapers that didn't even give a liberal slant at all, that just told the actual objective truth, not the 50-50, not the both, but the actual objective truth, which means if Republicans are lying 98% of the time and the Democrats are lying the other 2% of the time, that's the context for your coverage.
It's funny that you say that. So the founder of PolitiFact just published a book that came out, and I'm blanking on the man's name, but he's been on a press tour and podcast tour.
Kessler? Is that the one?
Maybe.
Kessler?
He's no longer part of PolitiFact, but he founded it. And the prologue to his book begins with an anecdote from when he was attending, he was a guest on C-SPAN, and was fielding questions from members of the audience. And this is in the pre-Trump era. And he gets a question from a member of the audience on the phone who says, "Hey, I've heard that Republican politicians lie more than Democratic politicians. You run PolitiFact. Can you tell me if that's true?" And the founder writes that he told the guy, he's like, "Listen, we've heard that too, but we don't really track these things. And that's not the sort of thing we're really interested in. We're just interested in calling balls and strikes, not necessarily aggregating them." And what he reveals in the prologue is he said he told a lie. He knowingly lied to that man calling him because he knew the truth. He said, "I knew at the time, because we did track this, that Republican politicians did lie demonstrably more than Democrats." And that was pre-Trump. And he's talked about that trend has only gotten significantly worse. And even if you control for Trump, you take the biggest liar out of it, and just politicians, that Republicans in the Trump world or in the Trump era, they lie more now than they did before.
They do. I mean, they've all gotten worse because, again, even the way they all dress. I mean, it's you called it an authoritarian cult, and that was exactly right. It is eerie and uncomfortable, and how they try to become like him. But I'm old enough. I've been at this for scary amount of time, 20 years, 25 years, and I'm sorry, but not I'm sorry to anybody, but anybody who would argue that this is a Trump thing. Republicans were they maybe weren't saying post-birth abortion back then, but they were talking about partial birth abortion, which is a made-up thing. Is not actually a real thing. There is a late-term abortion method, and is used when women are going to either die, lose their baby anyhow, or it's going to severely harm their health. It's used 0.3% of the time. They made it sound like it was every other week. Another woman's like, "Yeah, I know I'm at 8 months and 3 weeks, but I just feel like having an abortion, so I'm going."
Or deliberately withholding the abortion until the last possible moment.
Because that's fun.
Yeah, because women love to do that. They love to go all through the emotional and physical distress of an 8-month, 2-week pregnancy just to abort it at the last possible second because they don't have a fucking hobby. These are the Obama era death panels, all this other shit.
Having more guns makes you safer. Climate change isn't real. I mean, they've lied about things that are determined scientific fact. There are numbers, right? We know two different studies have shown if you have, again, you can choose to do this. I'm not going to, it's legal, of course, in this country, having a gun in your house. We make it very legal and very easy. But you should know there's a 450% higher chance that someone in your house will be shot if there is a gun there than if there isn't. That has been two studies, one at Harvard, one at Penn, showed this. Harvard Injury School and the Penn School was it? I'm trying to remember which one. It doesn't matter. I mean, in the end, and climate change, I don't know, 97% of climate scientists say that it's real, and 3%.
And Republicans have also, forced us to languish under the Dickey Amendment, which prevents the CDC from meaningfully investigating gun control and treating it as a health hazard, because Republicans have tacitly conceded they know. It's the same thing with climate studies. The reason they want to suppress these things is because they know what
you can't
the studies
say it in
will
Florida,
show.
right?
Yeah,
because they know there. When on high tide, sometimes when the waves are going up to the third block over in Miami, people are going to ask questions. So best to